Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prince Magnum channel where hot rodding and romance do coexist. I'm your host, Prince Magnum. Welcome to Sober Talk. This is already now my second live stream doing Sober Talk, and I went onto my Facebook page and asked the question, what should today's topic be? Should it be about cars? Should it be about romance? Or should it be about sobriety? Well, most people just they read the comment and they put a like on it. A lot of people didn't take the time to really, I guess one person asked for a talk about sobriety, and that is again my old friend Becky. So Becky, because you were kind enough to put that up there, that's what we're going to do because you know that's the way it works here on the channel. Okay. All right. So I got my coffee. I got plenty of smokes. Let's not beat around the bush on this one, okay? First things first. When I say we're going to tell my story, that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to tell it just as I would if I was in an AA meeting. That being said, um, the first thing that needs to be noted, okay, um, in when I tell my story, first things first, I don't spend a whole lot of time on my drunkalog, what we call our drunkalog in AA. The reason being is uh, a person's drunkalog is pretty much, we all did the same stuff. So I tell just enough to basically kind of cover the bases, you know, and after that, it's how I ended up in AA and um, more importantly, what I did in recovery. Okay, so again, I want to thank Becky for really asking me to do this particular live stream. Again, Becky, it's all your fault. It's like one of the last ones. I think it was the last one. Alrighty, so if you will, my story really begins. For those who do not know, maybe this is your first time here on the Prince Magnum channel. If it is, uh, thank you for coming on. The first thing we want to get out of the way is number one, and most importantly, um, I have served in the AA service structure off and on since I was 9 months sober. Um, I have served with the Public Information Committee. Uh, I've been the chairperson of the Public Information Committee and cooperation with the Professional Community Committee. I've been an alternate DCM. I've been an actual DCM. Uh, I've been a GSR on two different occasions, not at the same time. Uh, let's see. No, that's pretty well. I've been on Bridging the Gap. Um, And I think that covers it. I think that covers it. Okay. So that's my service structure history, and my sober date is February 7th, 2006. As I'm making this video, it's actually been over 12 years since my last drink. Okay? So, we covered that. Alrighty. Um, they say that you remember your first drunk, and you definitely remember your last drunk. My first drunk really came when I was the age of 14. Now, for those who do not know, I grew up in a broken home. Um, you know, Mom and dad. Dad was kind of rough and tough. Mom struggled with a lot of problems herself. And when they split up, you know, getting a divorce and everything, we're talking this is back in the early 90s. And parents getting divorces was still pretty, it just didn't happen that often. So, you know, coming from a home like that, back then, well, I knew my parents really didn't belong together, even back then. Um, when a lot of kids were going, my parents are getting divorced. I was like, my parents are getting divorced. You know, It was that bad. Um, that being said, uh, my first real drunk came when I was when I was 14, and my mom had given birth to my third brother, Travis, and we were, at home. Uh, well, had given birth to my little brother Travis, and he, back then the hospital used to send couples home with like this care basket, and in this care basket was a bottle of Chardonnay, wine, champagne, whatever, and some other stuff to kind of get the romance started again. Repeat business, right? Anyhow, all right. And that being said, um, we, this bottle of Chardonnay sat in the fridge. I think it was Chardonnay, champagne, something like that. And it sat in the fridge for probably 6 months. My little brother Travis was actually about 6 months old. And someone got the idea that they either A, need to drink it, or B, they need to throw it out. It was just taking up space in the fridge. And they didn't want to throw it. Mom and her live-in boyfriend didn't want to throw it out. So what they did was is they decided they were going to drink it, but they didn't feel right drinking it in front of all of us kids. Um, so they were like, well, we can give the kids just a little. I'm 14 years old. I mean, the best I've ever had is a wine cooler when I was a kid, and I had to share it with my little brother. So they poured us all a little, it was a glass about like that, and they filled it up about halfway. And they said, now you can have this, but you got to sip it, no guzzling. I'm an alcoholic. I don't understand the concept of sipping my alcohol. Okay, y'all got to understand. Some of us were born alcoholics, and I was born to drink. Okay, so that's exactly what happened with me. I started I started putting it away, and you know for some reason, that first drink, I wanted more right away. It's like, I couldn't get enough. And what ended up happening is that, I got close to the bottom, and then some of, like my brother Danny, and then, mom's live-in boyfriend had his two kids over, his two oldest, and a lot of them didn't like the drink. And I was, well, give it here, I'll drink it. No sense throwing it out. No sense in letting good alcohol go to waste. And I finished theirs, and I was starting to sneak a little bit from the fridge. Nobody was paying attention. I was in the kitchen doing dishes because that's what mom liked making me do. That's another subject for another time. But anyhow, before I knew it, I was really good and buzzed. I mean, that nice, warm, tingly feeling. And I didn't care anymore, okay? The fear of, a lot of fears were, I couldn't feel them anymore. And mom's live-in boyfriend always liked to try to, a guy's like 3 times my size, and him and I had gotten into many a fist fights by the time I was 14. Mostly me trying to protect my little brothers from him. So in all of this, I'm like, I was ready to go. I was ready to rumble, and basically got up in his face and told him I wanted to fight. I was ready to beat him with an inch of his life. And you know, mom tried to talk me down, and I told her off too. And she's like, wait a minute, how much have you had to drink? Enough to tell you what the fuck for. Anyhow, and I was put to bed at about 6 o'clock to sleep it off. And yeah, That was pretty wild. That was my first drunk. I'd like to tell you I was all hip, slick, and cool, that I drank hardcore from there, but I'd be a liar. And I won't lie to you all, okay? I won't lie to you. Because eventually, some way, somehow, that lie kind of comes back and bites you in the butt. Anyhow, my next drunk came when I was 18, and it was prom night, and this is this stuff still goes on today. Um, I had a buddy who was old enough to buy the alcohol, and he did. And back then, $100, which was all we had, $100 bought a lot of alcohol, and we're talking this is 1998. Okay, I didn't go to my prom. I took my high school sweetheart, who I refer to on the Prince Magnum channel as Lady Silver Mist. I took her to her prom. Okay, and there might even be some people who might watch this from high school who remember who Lady Silver Mist is. We were quite the unusual couple. uh, but anyhow, I took her to her prom, and we were rolling, and believe it or not, my 1978 Camaro. And, we went in, got our pictures, hung out a little bit, and then, we took off, grabbed some people, and, we went off to have some drinks. Now, I did not drink that night, okay, because I was a designated driver. Well, I had one drink, but it felt weird for some reason. I wasn't drinking more. Well, the next night, it's like, well, I don't have to drink. Well, I don't have to drive tonight, so I can drink. And we had a lot of leftover alcohol, so I started in. Um, and I got good and drunk. The next night, it was the same thing. The next night, it was the same thing. This went on for an entire week. And at the end of the week, I'm like, I better knock off. I'm liable to turn into an alcoholic. Duh. You know, little did I know. Little did I know. Fast forward. It's, I'm 21 now, and I'm like, I'm old enough to have a drink. Um, you know, I can, no one's here to tell me what to do. No one ever really kicked in the door of someone's house, said, you can't drink that. So that's, I'm like, okay. So my 21st birthday, I went out and I bought a fifth of Crown Royal, and I think it was a fifth of Tequila Rose. And I went home and I sat down with a good book, and I started to drink and read. I can't tell you what I read. All I know is I got rip roaring drunk. And in the process of that, I'm getting low on alcohol, and I'm like, maybe I should go pick up some more. And um, I couldn't find my keys. Hey, what's going on? Glad you could join us. Um, I I couldn't find my keys, and I'm like, well, shoot, I'll find them in the morning. So I finished what I had, and I went and crawled to the couch. I couldn't make it out of the living room, and I sure as heck couldn't walk. So I crawled to the couch and I passed out. Okay, and this was my 21st birthday. Next day, come to find out, my keys were actually sitting right next to me. I just didn't know it. Okay, it's just one of those things. Um, Now, pretty much from there, I'd like to. The the years started getting kind of hazy. Okay, it started getting hazy. I There wasn't much time that I drew a sober breath. This went on from the time I was 21 to the time I was 23. In that time frame, my oldest daughter was born. Okay, uh, who is now 16 years old. Real, beautiful little girl, beautiful. And I'd like to tell you all that I got sober for her. I didn't. It doesn't work that way with alcoholics. If you're a real alcoholic, you understand that it, you, as much as we want to, we can't. Okay, as much as we want to, we can't. And I tried. Okay. Um, what ends up happening? Thank you for the like. What ends up happening is, like I said, I carried on until I was 23, and I'm like, I've got to stop this. You know, I had ruined my relationship with my high school sweetheart, and we managed to kind of patch it up, but it was makeshift at best. And it was like that for many years. But I tried to put it down. I was going to put it down, and I put it down on my own for a year and a half. And that was the most miserable year and a half of my entire life. I hated everybody. I hated everything. But more importantly, I hated myself. In that time frame, I actually had a friend who once looked me in the eye, a very good friend of mine, Mercenary, if you ever watch this, I remember it. He looked me in the eye and he says, dude, you are so freaking mean. Wherever you go should be declared a demilitarized zone within a 10-mile radius of you. It was that bad. There's more details to that, and only those who sponsor me are allowed to really get that in-depth look because of my fourth step. I will just say that um, I am grateful that I never really lost it in that year and a half and what came later because there would have been no arrest made. They would have had to call it forceful or active suicide, I guess you could say. You know, it was that bad. We'll leave it at that. After that year and a half, I started sneaking alcohol. I would throw drinking parties, and I wasn't drinking, but yet I was. Everyone knew it, and I thought I was lying and hiding very well, very well. But for 3 years, you know, basically, I couldn't make it. I couldn't make it. At the end of it all, um, you know, I was falling apart. I couldn't do this anymore. You know, um, I remember sitting down and saying to Lady Silvermist, "I can't go on. I don't know what's wrong. I I'm angry with the whole world, and I just want to watch it burn. And the worst of it all I want is another drink." And it wasn't too terribly long after that. She packed up our two daughters and left. I was working overtime, and for those who do not know, who've never watched the Prince Magnum channel, I used to work in the medical field. I worked in nursing homes, passing medicine. I was a certified nurse's aide, certified med tech with insulin certification. And I was working a double shift. So after 16 hours, I came home to an empty apartment. I could not believe it. I kind of searched the apartment, thinking maybe this was, you know, just kind of clues that were saying that this was your wake up call. You need to straighten up, and I couldn't find that sort of thing. And I fell to my knees in the middle of the kitchen and said, "God, how could I have let it get to this point?" Um, I'd like to tell you all that I went and got help that day. I didn't. I went on a bender from hell for the next 3 days. Um, at the end of the 3 days, I sat down on my couch with a loaded 357 Magnum, Prince Magnum. Anyhow, I sat down on. I'm sorry. I sat down on my couch with that loaded 357 Magnum, and of all the screwed up things, I loaded all 6 chambers of that revolver. Um, and I can still remember exactly what rounds I was going to use. Um, and let me explain the sick mind of an alcoholic. I loaded all 6 chambers, and it only takes one. So I guess I thought I was going to miss. And if I'm going to miss that close, I probably shouldn't be trying suicide. The other thing that I want to point out is I wanted to make sure that I was not going to live through this. Okay. I wanted the pain to stop because I couldn't go on like this, but I didn't think that it could be helped. And I selected the rounds specifically. MagTech Guardian Golds, 125 grain, jacketed hollow points. Leaving the end of the muzzle, it left like a 6-inch fireball, okay? I wanted to make sure it was done. So I cocked the hammer, put it under the chin, and just as I'm about to squeeze the trigger, of all the things, the phone rings. Guy can't even kill himself without the phone ringing. I jumped and almost pulled the trigger anyways, but that did not happen. And I've told part of this story before, and it bears mentioning again. I answered the phone. I don't know why I answered the phone. You know, I'm getting ready to kill myself. Why am I going to answer the phone? I pick up the phone, and it's my friend Tanya. Now, again, I've told Tanya's story on the Prince Magnum channel, but we're going to tell it again anyways. And somehow, I don't know how in the world, Tanya asked the question, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sitting here on the couch." She said, "What are you really doing?" And I told her everything that was going on. And I'm like, you know, I'm going to end it. I can't go on. I don't want to live like this. She proceeded to chew me out like a good friend because she was not an alcoholic, but she chewed me out for a good little bit, and then she talked me into going to get help. I went to an outpatient treatment center, and in between, you know, between the time I went to the outpatient treatment center, I did drink quite a bit throughout that time. And I might go a day or two without drinking, but the next, you know, it was like a whole week. I got in to the outpatient treatment center, and the reason why February 7th is my sobriety date is on February 6th, the night of going into, I decided it was not wise for me to drink. Now, I'd already drank the night before going into the 6th, so going into the 7th, I decided it would not be in my best interest to drink. And the reason why is I didn't think it would be a good idea for me to show up hungover from drinking the night before. Come find out people did this shit all the time, so I would have been okay. So I went in there, and in the process of them putting me through the paperwork and everything, they told me I needed Alcoholics Anonymous. My initial reaction was, no, I don't. I can do this. You need to try Alcoholics Anonymous. No, I can do this. At least just give it a try. And they handed me an old Wear and Win. Evidently, this Wear and Win was actually outdated by 2 years. And I was like, I'll give it a shot. By the way, I still have that Wear and Win. I still have that Wear and Win, and it's up on my fridge right now. Now, I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. So the next thing you know, it's a couple days away from the meeting I had decided I was going to attend. And I called the church that this meeting was at, Trinity Lutheran to be exact, a Friday night newcomers meeting, which no longer exists. It closed down about a year ago. And what happened was, I called the church. They put me in touch with the guy who started the meeting, which has long since passed. And I went to, I talked to that guy, and I kept telling him how afraid I was. And he finally put my mind at ease, and he said, if you weren't afraid, I would say there's no hope. Because I was afraid he thought there might be hope for me. I had to work that day, but work actually let me have about 2, almost 3 hours for lunch just to do this meeting. And the nursing home that did that was Camelot Nursing Home over in Farmington. So I went to the meeting, And I pull up in my 1977 Oldsmobile Delta 88. Damn, that was a cool car. I miss that car. Anyhow, I pull into the parking spot and I shut the car off. I start to reach for the door handle and I got very afraid. And I started to put the keys back in the ignition. I was not going to stay. But then something told me, no, I said I was going to do this. Let's do this. So I took the keys back out, got the door open this time, but then I got afraid again. And I pulled the door to, started to put the keys back in the ignition. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. So this time I got out and I went in and talked to the guy who 12th stepped me. He was my 12th step. He 12 stepped me. I guess I was his 12 step call. And he talked me into, he's the one who talked me into the meeting. So I go up, go inside, got my cup of coffee, and he talked to me for a little bit and really put my mind at ease. And I went outside to have a cigarette. I'm feeling, I'm in my uniform. And I had to tell him I came directly from work. And he's like, oh, so you're a functioning alcoholic, which doesn't make any sense to me. But, some of those terms that get thrown around, because if you're an alcoholic and, there's no such thing as function in your life. Even though things are still coming, it's not functioning, trust me. But anyhow, I go in, I go outside to have a smoke, and there's some people coming in, and they're like, "Oh, a newcomer. What's your name?" And I tell them my real name, and stuff like that. And they made me feel really welcome. But they ask questions like, "Do you have a job? Do you have a car? Do you have cigarettes? Are you a smoker? Do you have cigarettes? Do you have money? Blah 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 blah." I'm like, "Yeah, I got all that." And as a matter of fact, they said when they asked, "You got a car?" I said, "Right over there." I pointed at the Delta, Old Gold, I called her. Sometimes I called her Magnum's Monster, but I digress. Um, Went inside, and I don't remember a whole lot from the meeting except a handful of details. I remember telling what happened and how I broke down and I cried and just poured my heart out, because I could not believe that this could happen to me. Y'all have to remember, okay? I was a certified nurse's aide, certified med tech with insulin certification. Um, had specialized in Alzheimer's and dementia. Um, you know, I'm not a dummy. I'm very good, and the matter whatever I set my mind to, I'm good at. How could I not beat this? I did not understand. Well, everyone tried to put my mind at ease, and there is, one real funny part when I started to tell. Uh, at one point, there was this gentleman who came in with this horrible limp, and the way he held his big book in his arm, and he kind of held it real funky like, and I'm like, he's smiling. How in the hell is he smiling and coming into an AA meeting and he's in that condition? How the is he smiling? And um, I you know, that grabbed my eye. Well, I heard him talk, and he says, "You're what, 18, 19," and I started laughing because here I was 26, coming into an AA meeting, and he's like, "Well, how old are you?" Well, he's like, oh, "Okay, 20, 21," and I laughed even harder. He said, "Okay, how old are you?" I said, "I'm 26," and everyone's like, "No, you're not." "Yes, I am. I'm 26." They're like, "No, you're not. There's no way." And I said, "Well, hang on here." I started to pull out my wallet. I was going to, and they're like, "Oh, no, 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 you don't have to do all that." And I said, "No, no, it's okay. It's okay." And to me at that time, I guess there was a part of me that didn't, thought that, I guess you had to be a certain age to be a member of AA. And that's not even true. Um, One gal says, "Well, I am curious." And, I opened up my driver's, I showed her my driver's license. She's like, "Oh my God, he really is 26." So the guy he thought it was a fake, he thought it was a fake ID. And he started talking about AA. Um, and in the process of all of that, when I heard him, I heard the enthusiasm, and I'm like, that's a guy I need to hang out with. So at the end of the meeting, when they asked who was willing to sponsor, I'd already been told at outpatient treatment, the one, my first session, to get a sponsor as soon as possible. And that I was like, if I'm going to get it, that's who I want it from. So after the meeting, I can, if I was standing in the middle of that church right now, I could point at the exact spot 12 years later. Um, I asked him to sponsor me that day, and he, of course, said yes and pointed it out on a where and when. So a couple different things happened in that very first meeting. Number one, I found my first sponsor, Sober Man, and you'll hear me refer to him regularly here on Sober Talk. Sober Man, I found, who he was more than happy to sponsor me. Um, and when I asked him to sponsor me, there was actually this booklet that was going around taking names and phone numbers, and that was what brought me in. I was like, I don't know if I'd be any help, but if you do, you guys want to, yeah, sure, sign yourself up. And I was like, all right, cool. And I signed myself up, and we don't know what happened to that book. That would be funny as hell if it showed up one day, 12 years later. But the other thing that happened is I got carded my first AA meeting. So that's funny to me. I'm sorry. Um, Sober Man, it's been a couple of days, and I got to go over to Sober Man's house. And let me tell you all right now, when I sat down on in the living room, when I came in the door, I sat down on the couch closest to the door, at the very edge, very close to the door, in case he heard something out of me that he was, because no one else liked me, or at least that's the feeling I got. Um, you know, if that was the case, then I needed to, beat feet out the door, in case he got really upset. And from there, he asked the question. He's like, "What do you want from me?" And I didn't fully understand the question, so I was, you know, because a lot of people kept asking me if I had a job, if I had a car, if I was a smoker, do I have cigarettes, blah 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 blah. And I was like, does this dude think I want money from him? No. And I wanted to clarify it. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, why did you ask me to sponsor you? Now, the short version of what I could have told him was, I want what you have in the program. But that's not what I said. I said, I can't stop drinking, and I need help. I I can't live like this. I I don't know what to do. I'm miserable living like this, and all I want to do right now is just die. I don't even know if anyone can even help me, but I've got to try something. And he kind of looks down like this. He looks up and he says, that big blue book that you got today, self-titled Alcoholics Anonymous, what we call the big book, I want you to pick it up right now. And I want you to crack it open. And let's take a look at a couple of things. That was I'd already been to 2 meetings, but that was my real introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. Sitting down, me as the sponsee, looking over at Sober Man, him as the sponsor, and getting into this book and starting to learn a spiritual way of life. Let's talk a little bit about the first step. The first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives were unmanageable. Um, Sober Man really, I was grateful. I'm more grateful today that I had him as a sponsor, my first sponsor, because what happened in that process, I could understand that I had a problem with alcohol, but how the hell was my life unmanageable? Okay, I still had a cool car, a lot of money tied up in it, didn't look like much, but dang, that thing would run. I had a job. I had a really good job, okay, paid well. Hello, welcome to the live stream. Another one just popped on. Welcome to the live stream. Um, you know, so I still had I had a cool, good job, roof over my head, cool car in the parking spot. And at that time, I had a lot of money in the bank account. I had a couple different bank accounts, all totaling around about $10,000, and that didn't even include what I had stashed in the apartment. Okay, so how was my life unmanageable? He asked the question, "Can your kids stand you?" No, they can't. you know, my family couldn't stand me. So there was the unmanageability. Unbelievable. Common sense, huh? And that's the extent of the problems we have. Sometimes we just can't see that. That's the problem whenever you're first getting sober. You can't see the train until it's 2 feet in front of you. My second step, the second step is it's a perfect idea. It's one of those things you just keep learning over time. So we sat down and we kind of looked at it, and he gave me a few days with it, and he let me learn it, a little bit over time, and pretty soon it was, you know, we get to a certain point, and where at the beginning we just have a good idea. Today, um, I guess the best way I could put it is, imagine trying to wrap your arms around this great big tree and your hands don't quite touch. So you can kind of get your arms around it, but not all the way. That's spirituality in a nutshell, if you will. So that was my second step. It's that simple. Now the third step we spent some time on, okay? And I'm going to tell you, if you are new to sobriety, if there's a serious problem in my sobriety, it's typically because I'm having a problem with my third step, okay? In a nutshell, okay? Now, um, from there, if you will, having a problem with my third step, yeah. What Sober Man had me do is he said we read the third step, page 60 to 63, in this book right here, okay? Read it from 60 to 63, okay? And he said, now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to read it once a day for 2 weeks straight, and if you miss a day, you got to start all over again. I'm going to repeat that. I had to read page 60 to 63 in this book once a day for 2 weeks straight, and if I missed a day, I had to start all over again. Mean old sponsors. Anyhow, it's a joke. It's a joke. What ended up happening was, as I read through the book, I started realizing how selfish and self-centered I was. How if I did anything good at that time, it was because I had an ulterior motive. You know, I didn't want to live like that. So I had to look. I had to, as the book talks about, I had to give it over to a higher power, greater than myself. So I realized at that point that I needed something larger than me. Okay, and for the record, I'm a firm believer that members of Alcoholics Anonymous may not necessarily know my higher power, but they're at least acquainted with. Okay. Anyhow, at the end of it's coming to the end of the 2 weeks, and in most cases, I was reading it 2 and 3 times a day, just trying to take in every last word. I mean, I wanted this thing. I get to the end of the 2 weeks. The next day, I'm going over to Sober Man's house, and I laid in bed, and I'm like, I knew at that point, if I drank again, I would never be the same again. Just take that in a moment. I knew I would never be the same again. Okay, that drinking would never be the same again. So I was okay with that. Went over to Sober Man's house. The day before, there's the prayer that's in the actual book. The prayer. The problem with that prayer is it was a lot of these and thous, and I don't talk like that. So I sat down and rewrote it as Americanized modern English. And he's like, "Oh, we got to do it out of the book." I said, "I don't think you fully understand." And I showed him. He's like, "You took out all the these and thous." And I said, "Yeah, I don't talk like that. So it's supposed to be from the heart. You know, let's do it from the heart." And for the record, for the record, um, I have noticed that people that have went and done it this way, I found did it a little bit, stayed sober a little bit longer than those, if they relapse, they stay sober a little bit longer than those that just did it with the these and the thous. I don't know if there's any correlation to that or what, but it's just something I've kind of noticed. And, just one of them things. Some people just, they do it as it is in the book and they do just fine. But I did it and I felt good. And we went over part of the fourth step. And then I started to try to jerk around with the fourth step. And sober man's like, "I thought you were willing to go to any lengths." And I'm like, dang it, he's right. So I got to work on it. I got all my stuff together to do the work, and I sat down with that with that fourth step, and I'm like, I can't do this just yet. I had to call up my friend Tanya. Um, I proceeded to tell Tanya how I felt about her. I didn't. Uh, for the By this time, I'm about a month and a half sober, and she had watched me start doing this thing, and I started. I ended up. I had fallen in love with her, and I was afraid to tell her. And in this phone conversation, I wasn't going to go on to my fourth step. I wasn't going to do it until I talked to her, and I started confessing some of my feelings. I didn't come out and tell her I was in love with her, but I started confessing my feelings. Um, in the process of this, um, you know, I won't go into too much detail from here. I've got a couple other videos on surviving romance that kind of touch base on this. But basically, in a nutshell, um, I started, I confessed the feelings and that sort of thing, and then, you know, I called up sober man and I said, "Hey, you'll just have to go ahead and catch it on the playback. Catch it on the playback." Someone left me a comment. He's got to take off, and I understand. Go do what you do. All right. Watch me on the playback. Anyhow, what ended up happening is I sat down, I called sober man, and I told him I was getting ready to start my fourth step. He said, "Okay." He said, "You run into any problems? Give me a call." All right. So I started working on it, and I was probably about an hour in, and I called up sober man, and I was crying. So there's actual there. I've still got it. There's actual tear splotches on a couple of the pages where I was writing, and I was crying my eyes out. And I called up sober man, and he said, "Magnum, how are you doing?" And what's going on? And the first words out of my mouth were, "I'm the biggest scumbag on the planet." And he said, "Oh," he said, "What was that?" And I repeated myself, and he said, "Obviously, you've been working your fourth step." And in the process of that, he basically told me that if it was too much, I needed to put it down. Well, that's not his exact words. He said, "If it gets to be too much, put the fucking thing down." So that was his exact words. And that man does not cuss. He said, "We're here to get sober, not to beat ourselves to death to drive us back to drinking." So, um, in the process of this, you know, that all of this happened on a Tuesday. Um, come Friday, Tanya is sick. She's in the hospital, so I had to put down my fourth step. And she went in with what looked like pneumonia. Okay. And to my knowledge, it was. And I'm like, so I stayed all night at the hospital. Well, I stayed till real early in the morning at the hospital. The next day, ended up working a double shift, and I didn't get to go see Tanya, but she'd asked to speak with me directly. So I'm like, you know what? Um, we're gonna throw caution to the wind. I purposely took the day off from work Sunday. I got all dressed up, and I still have the shirt that I was gonna wear to see her. You know, I had these nice black jeans on, this nice looking button down dragon shirt, and I got a dozen of roses. I was gonna tell her. I was gonna tell her. You know, I'm putting my fourth step down. You know, I'm gonna tell her how I feel. And I got to the hospital, and her sister met me and told me I couldn't go back and see Tanya. That she was she was in a coma. Evidently, she had died a couple of times on the on them, and she was in a coma, not expected to make it, and it just felt like someone just yanked the floor out from underneath me. Um, Felt like I was falling forever. So I sat in the waiting room with all of her family around, with a dozen roses just sitting there, and got to talk to her and met her dad, a good man, and her who was going to end up being her ex-husband was there, and it was just a very strange time. And and when I met her dad, he says, "Who are you?" And I told him who I was. And he said, "Well, how do you know Tanya?" I said, "Well, we work together." And I said, "May I ask who you are, sir?" And he says, "I'm Tanya's dad." And I said, I stood up, shook his hand immediately, and I said, "Sir, there's something I need to tell you." And he says, "What's that?" And I said, "Your daughter saved my life." And he puts his arm, he said, "Excuse me?" And I told him the story up to that point. Um, and he, in a nutshell, he said, "Is there anything I could do for you?" I said, "No." I said, I don't, I don't know what to do at this point." And gosh, that whole Saturday was just, it was very bizarre. Um, Monday morning, I go in, and basically they tell us that if she goes again through the night, that they were gonna, if she goes again, they're gonna let her go. And I didn't know what to think. I couldn't believe it. You know, here I was about to tell this woman I was madly in love with her, and you know, I, she was, she was gonna, she was gonna die. I go to work, um, and it was just shortly after 6 o'clock, and um, my my charge nurse came. Well, I'm sorry, the director of nursing came back, and um, she told me that Tanya had passed away, and I'm sorry. You'll have to excuse me. This is still it's still hard to talk about. 12 years later, it's still hard. She's been gone 12 years, and it's still hard to talk about. Um, After the funeral, I I did the only thing I knew what to do. I sat down with my fourth step, and I got to work. Pretty much the story, though the story is still going on today. I mean, I've got a lot of stories. Um, 6 months sober. You know, it's also my birthday. You know, I'm turning 27, and I'm 6 months sober the very same day. I went to Six Flags, bunch of friends, and a gal I was actually engaged to at that time. Had a son with. She turned out to be a heroin addict. Uh, all my money was gone. All those big bank accounts. Um, we we went to Six Flags, had a great time. And the next day, I'm sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I announced 6 months of sobriety. And sober man and I, when he handed me my 6 month coin, him and I burst into tears just as if I'd been pulled from a horrible accident. As soon as he hands me my coin, we give each other this great big hug, and you know, it was awesome. It was awesome. I remember a couple months later telling him, I feel like it's still my 6 month sobriety birthday party. And I'm like, when's the shoe gonna drop? And he says, Prince Magnum, climb on that wave and ride it as long as you want. I did. Had a great time. Had a great time. The party did not stop for a long while. Relationships came and went. Service work, I got a great deal out of. Well, fast forward. I'm 3 years sober. I go to my first area assembly as an alternate GSR for the Noon Topic group, my home group at that time. And I go in, and I ended up talking in front of a bunch of people that day and got a partial standing ovation. It was exciting. It was fun. I had a great time. You know, 6 years sober. I'm facing charges for a crime I didn't commit. Stayed sober through it. Got married in sobriety. To this day, if I go to visit Tanya's gravesite, Princess Faye leaves a thank you letter on her gravesite, well, in this special little tin, thanking her for keeping me alive. Today, I have the opportunity every now and again. I go to meetings and I tell the same story. And I'm grateful that I have that opportunity. 12 years later, you know, I'm still riding that wave of happiness and sobriety. People today, they're like, what, you high on life? No, I'm high on spirituality. I'm sober today. Folks, I'm going to tell you right now, I can have the whole day blow up in my face. And I have had those days where everything blew up in my face. But if I could still sit on the edge of my bed at day's end and say, at least I'm still sober, it's not been a bad day. It's been a successful day. And I'm grateful for that. At this point, pretty much, you know, the story is what it is what it is. It is what it is. You know, either A, you got something out of it, or B, just hang on to whatever you can out of it. And maybe you might need it down the road. Either way, it's all good. All right? So, this video has went on a lot longer than I usually do in a meeting. You know, when I usually tell my story in a meeting, it's usually about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. We went over that, but that's okay. Because if there was something in here for you, again, for you to take away, please do so. Now, throughout the Prince Magnum channel, for quite a long time, you have all heard me say the special line, if nobody has told you that they love you today, Prince Magnum does, God bless you, and have a happy 24. Real quick, I want to tell you all how that line came about. And I've told this before in an earlier story. Well, in an earlier version of Sober Talk, one of my very first videos. So, but many of you may not want to go that far back. The Prince Magnum channel has videos spanning now 3 years, okay? Probably getting closer to 4. Actually, I think even longer than that. 6 years ago, I think I even put my first video up, okay? But anyhow, in that, how that line came about was, as I was sitting in Sober Man's living room, and he was talking about how there was this guy who used to, you know, who used to say that line Not obviously not Prince Magnum. He would use his real name, his real name, and he would say that line. And even if that was all he said, that mean maybe he didn't feel he had anything to contribute. And uh, his name was Floyd. Took me a moment to remember his name, Old Floyd. And he said, he would always say, "Well, if nobody's told any of you that they love you today, Old Floyd does. God bless you and have a happy 24." And when he told me that, I'm like, wow, man. I was like 7 months sober. I was like, wow, man, that's really how, that's how I feel about everyone in AA. Do you think old Floyd would mind if I used that? And he said, no. I think he would be tickled to death. And so I started using it from there on out. I think there was two whole meetings where I didn't say it. And one of them was where I was the chairperson. I just kind of forgot to say it. And another one where somebody got kind of ticked off the meeting before and, said some hateful things about it, about me saying that. And so the next meeting I didn't say it. And I'm like, I didn't even feel right. So, screw them. I'm not there to make them happy. I'm there to keep myself comfortable in my skin so they can go just fuck all, okay? Excuse my language. So I started in again. And in that time frame, I'm very grateful that I still say that today. Sober man to this day, every time we talk, he always says that that's going to be chiseled on my tombstone. Sober man, I'm going to be cremated. Anyhow. But anyhow, so that's where that line came from. And if you don't fully understand it, there's a lot of people out there, alcoholic, not addict, or just regular, normal, everyday people that don't feel loved. And when I say it here on the Prince Magnum channel, it's my hope that someone out there who needs to hear that someone loves them will hopefully feel that through the camera or in an AA meeting. They'll feel that, and maybe that might be the one piece of hope that they get that day. The happy 24 hours in a day, all we're really given is that 24 hours in a day, and we have to make the best of it. So why not make it a happy 24? And of course, whatever God is to you, even if you don't believe in God, whatever God might be in your life, I hope that they bless you today. Okay, so that's what all that means. I hope you all take a little something away from this. Brings us to the usual spot, but we're going to end it slightly different because this is Sober Talk. Be sure to follow me on Patreon. If you have anything you can donate, always appreciated. Very much appreciate all of that. Because whoever is able to donate the most, I'm putting together a really cool kind of big thank you box for who was ever able to donate the most. And the deadline for that giveaway is going to be August the 7th of this year, my birthday. So whoever's able to donate the most, thank you very much. If you don't, hey, I understand. We've all been there. All right. And if you're not subscribed to the Prince Magnum channel, we do all sorts of things. We talk about sobriety. We talk about romance. We talk about hot rods. And we'll be doing an alternate hot rod series soon. How soon, I don't know yet. I'll get to y'all on that. But, there is a little something on here for everybody. Even in Sober Talk today, we heard a little bit about hot rodding, and we still heard about romance. So again, if you're not subscribed to the Prince Magnum channel, you really are missing out. And if you're really savvy, you're going to hit the bell icon. You'll be notified every time we upload a brand new video. If you have any positive feedback, be sure to leave it in the box below. Always greatly appreciated. Any hate, do understand this is Sober Talk, and you got to be a special kind of dickhead to leave any hate on a series like this. You have to be a special motherfucking asshole, okay? And I'm not talking special like in really good, okay? You catch my meaning. And the usual Sober Talk spot. At day's end, I hope all of you need me as much as I need you. And for all of you out there, if no one out there has told you that they love you today, Prince Magnum does. God bless you, and have a happy 24. Thank you.